10x your service design offering with Smaply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smaply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smaply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Hey folks, and a very warm welcome to another episode of This Is HCD. My name is Jerry Scullion and I'm a service designer, design coach and trainer working internationally with change makers from all over the world. Now, did you know we have a private change making community as part of our ecosystem on This Is HCD? We have a tight community of around 20 change makers who connect monthly and support each other, learning from each other, all with a focus on improving society through design. Interested in learning more? Well, the link is in the show notes. Now, in this episode, I speak with a remarkable designer that I met when I did a recent keynote at UX Scotland. He too was a keynote the day before I spoke, and he was simply awesome. He was genuine, sincere, transparent, honest, knowledgeable, and he was filled with a sense of purpose when he spoke. His name is Heldiney Pereira, and he's based in London and is a director of Samaritans, and he's also a designer at Monzo. As a trigger warning, we do speak about mental health issues in this podcast, but before we jump in though, I want to give a huge shout out to today's sponsor on the podcast, Miro. Now, Miro approached me earlier this year to collaborate, and it was a great fit as I use the tool all the time. And I've been using Miro pretty much since it launched, and at that time I used it primarily as a repository tool in government where I was unable to access tools to help sense make my data. It allowed me to share my research data to stakeholders all over the world at that time, and this was way back in 2015. So since then it became part of my staple suite of tools that I use and access daily. At its core, I see it as a great tool to enable greater sense of alignment within projects, which, as design starts to get included more in complex problems, it becomes more and more important. Alignment is part of any movement, and we want to move from chaos to clarity, and this tool helps me and my clients enormously. Show some love by visiting the link in the show notes or by visiting www.miro.com/podcast. Now, let's jump into this episode with Heldiney. I saw you speak in UX Scotland, was it 2 months ago? Probably is 2 months ago. And absolutely loved your talk, okay? And I loved you as well, truthfully. I was more gutted when your talk was over that you weren't going to be able to hang around and chat and, connect a little bit more. But we're hoping to do a little bit more of that in this podcast. But for our guests, or for our listeners, should I say, maybe start off, tell people a little bit about where you're from and what you do.
Yeah, I'm not sure how far back I'm going, but I think it is relevant. But I was born in a very small island in Africa called São Tomé and Príncipe.
Cool.
It's a former Portuguese colony, so it's off the west coast of Africa. It's an island with a very small population of roughly 200,000 people. I was born there, lived there until I was 5, moved to Lisbon, and then left Lisbon at 11, and have been in London since, basically.
Wow.
So there are a few different countries in my history.
I love when I have people on the show who've lived in several different places, but it's really interesting that you've lived in different places before the age of 11. What do you think that perspective has given you as your life has evolved? Living in 3 different places, especially 2 different places before you're 11, is quite interesting. What does that give you as a change maker?
That's an excellent question. I think it took me a while to fully realize that my brain was shaped in this way. I definitely think it became very easy to see similarities, different versions of very similar things in the different countries that I lived in. And I think one of the side effects of that is generally finding myself very difficult to be, say, patriotic. I struggle to firmly believe in the views of any one country because I've seen variations of culture, variations of beliefs, and ways of perceiving life, and
Mm,
what's polite, what's impolite, that
right.
allow me to step outside a little bit and to
Yeah.
look at it from a more human perspective and understand that we have like different ways to try and achieve similar things.
So in some ways, you're able to cherry pick parts of the cultures and parts of the belief systems that align to you as a soul or as a person, like, is what I'm hearing. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel more like a citizen of Earth than
Yeah.
anything else.
And I heard that come through in your talk as well. It was very much a kind of, you've been on a journey, and it makes sense now. I didn't realize about the journey you had from a child to Lisbon and then to London. But maybe tell us a little bit more around the roles, because you've got two incredible roles at the moment. Tell us.
I certainly find them incredibly nourishing. I am a director of a branch of roughly 100 volunteers of a charity called Samaritans, which
Hmm.
is a mental health charity.
Yeah.
It started as a suicide helpline with a mission to help decrease the number of people who die by suicide. It's now broadened its reach to support anyone who is struggling with mental health. And it could be you've had a really bad day at work, it could be you're going through a depressive episode, or it could be that you're feeling suicidal and you want to speak to someone.
Mm,
I became a volunteer after having received support from them when I myself was questioning the value of my own life.
mm,
I didn't necessarily feel compelled to want to take my life, but I was questioning what the purpose of it is.
mm,
So when I made the call, I was blown away by the empathy that was shown to me by a complete stranger on the phone, how anonymous the service remained. I never had to disclose anything about myself, and I was still shown a level of kindness that helped me heal and helped me see the world in a new light. I wanted to learn to do whatever that volunteer did
mm,
with me. So I became a volunteer roughly 5 to 6 years ago now. And throughout that journey, at some point, the branch that I joined chose
mm.
for me to be the next director. And that was about 10 months ago now. And every director of a Samaritans branch has a tenure of roughly 3 years. So I'm roughly a year into a 3-year tenure of leading the branch.
Yeah.
It's basically a CEO role for a nonprofit.
Okay.
And in addition to that role, I'm a lead product designer for Monzo, a digital bank with no brick and mortar branches, whose mission is to make money work for everyone. In many ways, you probably recollect from my talk, I think of them as being very related.
Yeah.
Uh, I think they are ultimately about shaping a better version of life, day-to-day life for all of us in the
Mm.
UK.
So what do you see the correlation between money and new banks? How do they connect with the Samaritans work? I want to see and hear your perspective on that. I'd love to hear it.
I think this is also highly relevant to what I experienced in my childhood. And what I experienced was so I was raised by a single mother and in a household where financial literacy wasn't the highest. And my mom and my auntie and my grandma, who I grew up with, all had to figure out a lot of things on their own.
Sure.
And in that space, you end up taking a lot of guesses and you end up having to learn a lot of things firsthand, like how do you properly use a credit card. And there were moments where in my household we would struggle financially, and my mom and others would find alternative ways to get money, and one of them was a credit card. And I remember how quickly it got out of hand and the emotional strain that placed in my mum to
I'd
use a
say.
credit card and to feel like it got out of hand and to find herself having to repay copious amounts of interest on top of the amount that she
Yeah.
used on her credit card. And the mental health impact that had on her immediately started to affect all of us in the house. It affected me, it affected her relationship with her sister, with her mother. And that is just one example of how I think our relationship with our money directly influences everything in our lives, our
Mm.
well-being and the well-being of those around us.
Yeah. So what do you say to people like the cynical people out there who might question, working for a bank and, what value you can bring to even a new bank, who are trying to disrupt the market, I guess, you know, What impact can you actually have within an organization like that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. There are certainly systems at play in a broader banking system that are harder to shift
Yeah.
than others. And being a challenger bank, being a digital bank, doesn't necessarily make it any easier to shift any of these really well entrenched systems. In some ways, you could argue it maybe makes it a bit harder actually because you're the new player. But I think all great things in history take a good deal of time to come to fruition, and patience and commitment. I think one way or another, we have to evolve our financial system to better serve the people that are part of it, and to
Sure.
be more equitable and to better favor good outcomes for everyone. The FCA recently updated its expectations of organizations to lead to good customer outcomes. And this is the kind of training that everyone that works for a bank has to go through and be aware of. So the work that we all do as employees of a bank has to really evidently show that we're trying to lead to good outcomes for the people that choose to bank with us. And principles like that are just one of the ways in which contributing to this system and helping towards that change that happens over time, slowly but surely, I think will lead to a better version of reality for us all.
Absolutely. And I wasn't trying to be patronizing when I asked that question or anything other. Like, I believe in what you're trying to do, and your keynote at UX Scotland was very much in line with what I was speaking about as well. But one of the things that did strike me at the keynote, and I remember having it, I didn't take too much notes at Scotland, but I took a few bits and pieces of your talk, was resilience seems to be a big thing in your toolkit, your personal toolkit. And I'm hearing it there as well, like the long game, improving the situations. It's not going to happen overnight. These phrases that I heard you utter when you were on the stage, where does that come from and how do you nurture it?
Yeah, I think for me personally, resilience is strongly tied to purpose. And I think you can't, for me alone, I don't think I can have one without the other. Moments where I feel disconnected from my purpose, I feel a lot less resilient. When I experienced what I experienced when I decided to call Samaritans, in that space, I was feeling disconnected from my purpose. And in feeling disconnected from my purpose, my resilience was impacted.
Yeah.
And I had to find a way to reconnect with my purpose, to reprioritize, to refocus, and feel like I am on a path that whenever I look back on my life, I will feel proud of the choices I made, and I will feel fulfilled that I was able to achieve whatever it is that I achieved. And I think to find yourself in a place in your life where you're able to be the most resilient version of yourself, I think you need to understand what is the thing that makes you tick most, what makes you feel most motivated to get up in the morning. And when you're able to zoom out and look in the long term and think about what are the outcomes of the things that I'm working on right now, and are those things worth sticking around for and working as hard as I can or as smart as I can, because rest is also really important, and it's important to pace yourself. Often it's a marathon, not a sprint, and trying to sprint can burn you out very quickly. I think resilience to me is a direct side effect of having a strong relationship with your purpose.
Are you okay to talk about the journey towards your purpose?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you were younger, when you were you left Lisbon at 11, I think you said, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you left Lisbon, were you already in line with, were you already considering why you were here and what you were doing? And what age, if not, what age did that conversation start to play in your head?
That's an excellent question. I spent some time reflecting on how is it that I've come about having this understanding and this relationship with my purpose. And I'm convinced that for most people I speak to who do seem to have a relationship with their purpose, the music is always playing in the background. And I think what you end up developing over time is just an ability to listen to the music and to learn to describe the music that you're hearing to someone else. I think from my earliest memories, I remember caring about the planet. I remember caring about the people around me, My grandma and my mum were both very sensitive people. My mum is still a very sensitive person. She's still alive.
Mhm.
My grandma isn't. And I think I've inherited those traits from them somehow.
Yeah.
I'm a very sensitive person. I pick up people's feelings a great deal. And as a result, I find it really important to try and lead to the best emotional outcomes for everyone around me. So having understood that about myself fairly early on, seeing how it manifested itself in the ways that I felt when I was at school, and the ways that I felt when I was deciding what I wanted to do for a career, and having chosen human computer interaction and product design, which is a discipline very grounded in leading to the best emotional outcomes for people in the process. I think you are influenced by your purpose, whether you have a strong understanding of it or not. Before I had a described version, a written version of my purpose, I'd already made career decisions. I'd already made choices that were in line with that sense of purpose. It was just probably roughly, I would say, 5 to 6 years ago when I sat down and I retraced my steps that I was able to actually put into words. I think this is happening deliberately, and I think this is related to something. And then I was able to describe that thing a bit better.
So it was around the same time that you phoned the Samaritans, and that there was a realignment or a sort of a reintroduction to that conversation, that tape playing that I refer to sometimes on the podcast. Is that right? It's about the same time that things were happening. There was probably quite a lot of, kind of, I don't know even how to describe it. You discussed it in your talk. There was an incident that happened and a sort of a series of things that happened that led you to making that phone call.
I can share a bit more about the journey from that point. And what happened specifically was my girlfriend broke up with me at the time, and the experience led me to question my sense of goal setting and purpose, because I had set myself the goal, and it was an important part of my sense of purpose to be with this person for the rest of my life. And it, because of how connected I feel to the people I feel connected to, it was really important to me. Being an only child, having a small family, the people I have in my life are really important to my sense of identity, my sense of meaning. So when someone broke up with me, there was an element of disruption that took place in my ability to navigate myself in a complex world, where, having felt as disoriented as I did, I needed the support of someone to help me understand where I was, what led me there, and to give me to help me find some way forward. After having experienced that and having shared with the Samaritan what I did, which that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with this person, the Samaritan asked me a really pointed question. Do you think you're being fair on yourself by setting goals that are dependent on the choices and actions of other people? And I think that question specifically was really powerful to me, because it helped me understand that I need to have some element of a self-awareness that cannot be strongly influenced by other people, in a way that allows me to remain grounded and allows me to be able to navigate when the going gets tough and things get a bit complicated.
And that aligned. I remember when you were talking about that in your keynote, which, by the way, folks, I've got a link to it in the show notes. I was emailing back and forth with the organisers of UX Scotland this week, and those videos are up. Have you seen them?
I haven't seen them yet.
I've seen your talk. You haven't even seen your talk. Only joking. But I'll put a link to that in the show notes. It's really good. But that whole kind of piece of what you're talking about there, of the question that the Samaritans gave you, it almost like there was an opportunity there and an accountability that we all have for our own actions. And it seems to me like there's a lot of people out there that don't really understand that they've got their own accountability for their own actions. And I know Eckhart Tolle, he speaks about this. You are in control of your mind, and you can externalize these things and examine it and see what the triggers are. But ultimately, if you're in a situation where it's quite complex, you've got the ability to decide what you want to do next. And that's what I could hear in your talk. Like, you've got this resilience, but at that moment in time when you'd broken up with your partner, we're going to come to a positive bit in that conversation in a minute, because it's not all doom and gloom for you. Are you married with that person now?
We got back together,
Yay! way.
So we were apart for a year, and we've been total been together now for 12 years.
Yeah, there you go. Look. But at that moment, there was a sense, I remember speaking to you afterwards, where you were like, I don't know what to do here. What was that process like, and how you were able to, because you were separate for a year. What were the things that you were doing in that year? Because it sounds like it was transformative. And it sounds like, you connected with your purpose in a very deep way. Who was involved, and what were you doing in that year?
I think growing up, one of the things that tends to happen as you form a sense of self in the 21st century. I remember when I was younger seeing a fact that in one day, someone from the 21st century could see more information that someone might in their entire lifetime in the 18th or 17th century or something. And I don't know how true that is, because I don't know whether we can actually go back and compare these things.
We'll do a very check with Cherry data there. I'm just going to ask the algorithm. Yeah, that's true. Whether it's true or not, it's still, even if it's 50% true, I would believe it's still kind of mind-blowing. Hey, sorry for interrupting the episode, but I wanted to tell you about today's sponsor, Miro. Many people connect it to just being another business collaboration tool, but for me, it's so much more. I use it to manage my own ikigai, to help me keep track of my own life and career. This one here that you can see won't get shared to anyone else, so it's a private board. Only I can see it. Now, the beauty of all this is I didn't need to create these canvases from scratch. People on the Miroverse upload them, and there's a constant stream of updated frameworks there for all us changemakers all around the world to use for free. Many of which come with really detailed instructions on how to use them. So for more information, see www.miro.com/podcast, where you can get 3 free canvases for free for life. Let's get back into that episode.
Absolutely. So we have a lot more information to navigate, certainly each day, than ever before.
Yeah.
And I think in that information, there's a lot of competing information. And I think that one of the biggest themes is this idea that you can acquire the thing that you're seeking. And marketing and a few other industries have proliferated that mental model of reality and fulfillment. And I don't think marketing is evil, by the way. I think there are ways to do it in a way that really benefits people's lives. But I think in that space, it can be quite difficult to step outside of a lot of the noise and recalibrate yourself. And like many other people, I had developed a sense of self-worth that was strongly attached to someone else who showed me that I was worthy of love. And when I lost that person that was giving me a strong indication that I was worthy of love, and that became the compass through which I determined my value, then I had to seek another way of determining whether I am worthy of love, whether I am valuable, or whether if I'm not, then maybe I don't belong in this world. And that's where the conversations around questioning whether you should be alive or you shouldn't be alive start to arise. It becomes an exploration. If I am to be alive, what do I bring to this world, and what makes me worthy of being here? And I think a lot of that energy that would have been directed towards nurturing a relationship I had with this person, I was redirecting towards myself. I was redirecting it towards working on my own mind through reading books that I was starting to really enjoy, through spending time with friends that I hadn't ever spent as much time as I was spending with, exercising. I began to set really ambitious goals for myself. I thought, if there's a chance that I don't belong here, why not try and make the most of the time that I am here? And I set myself the goal of running marathons, which I did. I set myself the goal of eventually volunteering for this mental health charity to help me out. And I just had a list of things that I just wanted to get through and experience and see what it feels like. And somewhere along the way, I happened to fall in love with this idea that I am good enough as I am.
Sure.
And that I don't need validation from an external source that I belong here. I think I do. And I do bring value to the world, and I do want to be here.
Yeah. One of the things that we were speaking afterwards was the ability to stand on a stage and talk about this topic is, for some people, it can be kind of triggering, or it can be like a revelation for others. And in Ireland at the moment, one of our children of our country, Sinead O'Connor, died a couple of weeks ago. And we don't know how she died, whatever it means, but she did do stuff in the 90s that was really triggering for the culture that we were in at the moment. And I'd love to get your perspective on it. Like, when they started speaking about their mental health in the mid-90s, people were like, whoa, there was a huge stigma about it. And it's only after Sinead O'Connor has died that, of course, we're talking about and we're celebrating their life. One of the singer-songwriters that I hold in the highest regard is called Glenn Hansard in Ireland, and he had a great phrase that we love to celebrate our heroes on the wall, but not in the room. We can't handle them. And it's very true. What do you think? There's probably people out there, and I know when you were speaking, it was like, oh, okay, we're talking about mental health even now. So how do you process those kind of conversations when people say to you that it might be risky to talk about this stuff so much in the open? How do you respond to those kind of questions? Because I'm all for it, but there are still generations out there that say, is this wise to be talking about this stuff?
That question is one of the most important questions of the work that I do. I think from my perspective, the way I simplify it is, I think of mental health as existing on a spectrum, a lot of things. And I don't, in this case, mean the neurodivergent spectrum. I mean an emotional spectrum.
Yeah.
And that happens, it fluctuates throughout the day, it fluctuates throughout your lifetime. And you can be in a largely emotionally positive side of that spectrum, or largely emotionally negative side of that spectrum. You can be walking down the street and suddenly it starts raining, you didn't bring an umbrella, and someone's driving and they're reckless and they splash a massive puddle in your face.
That wasn't me.
And,
It wasn't me, by the way. I know you're looking at me. I only did it last week to them and they deserved it. Only joking. Go on.
And that takes you from maybe being on the neutral side of the emotional spectrum to being on the not so good side of the emotional spectrum. My experience of having felt suicidal was being on the extreme of that spectrum.
Yeah.
But I think all of us every single day fluctuate in that spectrum. Some of us fluctuate more wildly than others. Some of us will have phases where we are more deeply in one side of the spectrum than the other.
Yeah.
I think for me, it became really important to speak about it because I'm someone who's very optimistic, who's generally very happy.
Yeah.
And the fact that I could experience the extreme of that spectrum on the not so good side helped me really build empathy and understand that if someone who generally had a wonderful childhood, my mom was very kind and loving towards me, even though there were financial struggles in our households and a bunch of other struggles. We were a very loving family.
Yeah.
So I was generally always a very happy kid, very fulfilled. So when I was struck by this experience, it helped me understand that I think we all need a level of support. We all need a level of perspective when we do experience these extreme fluctuations in our emotional well-being. So talking about it for me is about normalizing it. I don't think it has to be always the extremes. I think if you are able to speak about it candidly before it gets to that extreme, or as you are in that extreme, I think we will save lives. And I can't think of a good reason why we wouldn't want really talented people like Robin Williams, Sinead O'Connor. We don't know why, but let's say there is a possibility that might be part of the reason. We know there are countless musicians, there are artists, creators, people who have brought us really wonderful things that we were not able to keep here because they did not receive the support that they needed. They were not able to have open spaces to speak about what they were going through. And I can't think of a good reason why I wouldn't want to play a role in keeping all of that good stuff here on this earth, because I'm not sure what's on the other side. I'm not sure I'm going to get to listen to that music again. I'm not sure I'm going to get to see that art again, so on and so forth.
I think it's really well said. There are instances, though, and I coach a lot of change makers around the world, and it's not possible for them to talk about it in their organization. So I'm assuming Monzo is relatively forward thinking in their culture. You just have to look at their branding and their marketing and speak to people like yourself. So it's probably more safe, and I use that word kind of delicately, to raise these things. Like, it's not going to impact your career growth. But there are situations there in organizations that are relatively restricted in their progress, is probably a very nice way of saying it. And they're somewhat toxic. So it's not always appropriate, in my understanding, to be able to speak to these kind of topics. What advice do you give to people who are in those situations? They could be government, where they really struggle to bring their full self to work, and they maybe feel disconnected to their purpose, but they yet have mortgages and mouths to feed. I'm giving you
I agree with you.
Giving you a complex problem.
Thank you. I agree with you. I do believe that Monzo is progressive in a number of ways, and extremely inclusive as an organization. I definitely find it easier to be able to carry myself how I choose to carry myself in an organization like Monzo. But I'm convinced that the vulnerability that we need to show to ourselves and to others around us, happens to varying levels of personal comfort.
Yeah.
I think just because I work at Monzo and others work at Monzo does not mean most folks here have an equal level of comfort of being vulnerable, even in a space like this. And there are a variety of reasons why that might be. Someone may have not fully embraced their emotions in the way that they may need to. They've not fully explored their emotions in a safe space with a trained professional like a therapist, or maybe a volunteer mental health practitioner who can help them find some words initially to explore their emotions in the way that I was supported in that call with that volunteer Samaritan. And there are a variety of other reasons, and they go on and on. I think in terms of the advice, it's important for all of us to think about, where can we start? Where are we comfortable today taking one step further than we were yesterday? I don't think the answer is for all of us to suddenly start talking about really profound parts of our emotional experience in life if we've never done that before. But I think it could be one step that the next time someone asks you, how are you doing? That you could maybe give something closer to an honest answer. Instead of saying, I'm good by default, maybe you could say, actually today, I'm not 100%, but, hopefully things will get better as the day goes on. And for me, sometimes just giving a simple answer like that sparks a conversation. Someone goes, oh, interesting. Why, what's making you not 100%? And you can speak about something very light to you and something that might have happened that day, the driver that drove past and splashed you.
Not me.
Or, over time, your relationship with that human can build in complexity, and you find yourself having a really meaningful connection at work, for example. I saw some research from, I read it in Harvard Business Review, but one of the sort of strongest factors to determining whether someone is likely to stay at an organization is whether they have a best friend at work. So there is something about us as human beings that's really important for us to feel connected to the people that we surround ourselves with, our family, our friends, our colleagues. And I think one of the best ways to feel connected to people is for them to feel like they see us as who we are. And one of the ways to do that is to be truthful. And being truthful requires a level of vulnerability.
So we're coming towards the end of the conversation. I know everyone's no, but I want to ask you a question about how bringing your true self, aligning to your purpose, what impact that has had on your role as a product designer within Monzo.
Makes me more motivated to approach my work in a way that is unique to me. Over time, I found it harder to lean on predetermined frameworks because they are what everyone uses. For example, I used to be someone who frowned upon the term gut feel. I found it very abstract, very ambiguous. But over time, I've learned to trust my gut a bit more. If something doesn't feel right, instead of just leaning on what the data is telling me, I will pursue that feeling. I'll try and understand, why does this not feel right? What's missing here? And I'll try to uncover what it is that's leading me to feel that way
Sure.
as a product designer. So you could be working on a project despite it making perfect sense for the business, despite the data telling you this is the right thing. When you're looking at the design, something isn't feeling good, and pursuing that feeling, trusting that your gut is telling you something important, whatever it may be, usually leads to somewhere really fruitful. And I think sometimes when we don't do that as design practitioners, we look back and we think, I now know why my gut was telling me what it was telling me. Now that I
Sure.
see it out there, I now know where it was, but it's out there now.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's harder to go back.
True. In terms of your maintenance, I guess, of, Heldiney, how and what are you doing on a daily, weekly, monthly practice to ensure that you yourself and your career are being looked after?
Yeah, some people have achieved it, and I achieved it in phases in my life, but I don't believe that we can consistently take good care of ourselves.
Yeah.
I think everything happens in phases. There are phases where I feel incredibly good at taking good care of myself.
Yeah.
There are phases where I'm less good at taking good care of myself. I remember when my grandma passed away 2 years ago, the emotional journey that took me on led me to eventually start running I signed up for triathlon. I completed the triathlon. It was really excellent. It felt a really great sense of fulfillment. When I took on my director role, there was a brief moment where I was able to run less. I really enjoy running. I really enjoy swimming, and just being active makes me really happy. And in that time, in that phase, when I was taking on additional responsibility, it's a volunteer role, so I have to do it on top of my work, my full-time job at Monzo. There was a moment where my relationship with the things I was working on was at an imbalance with my ability to take good care of my physical health, certainly. My mental health, I feel like I surround myself with a lot of people with a lot of techniques that have helped me guarantee or increase the likelihood that generally my emotional well-being is at a good place.
Yeah.
But being active, being able to get out there and run and swim is also a really important part of how I take good care of myself. And those things only up until recently have been at an imbalance. And now I'm starting to get control of it again. And I'm feeling really settled in my director role, and I have a really great leadership team. So I'm able to start to prioritize parts of my life a bit more.
In terms of your alignment to your purpose, there was obviously 5 or 6 years ago, there was a journey that you went on. Was there anything that you did at that time in terms of reflective practices that you incorporated that help you, if you want, for a better phrase, see the light? What were the things can you remember, or what are the books you read? Any recommendations for people out there looking to go on that journey at the moment?
In terms of practices, there are a few books that perhaps may not be what would be traditional recommendations in this space, but one of them is a book called Principles by Ray Dalio. And Ray Dalio is an investor, so it's interesting that book specifically carries many principles for how to think of your life that have been really helpful for me. One of them is surround yourself with people who can see things that you can't.
Yeah.
And that, as a principle for thinking about your career, is also a really great principle for thinking about your life. I have a partner, Jess, who
Hi, Jess.
we did break up for a year, but she's incredibly good at spotting things that I might take a bit longer to spot.
Yeah.
She might be seeing a pattern in my day-to-day life, a pattern in my thinking and the things I'm saying that gives me an early signal into something that I might have taken a bit longer to realize. And that is one of the ways in which I didn't realize it, but some of the choices I made in my life helped me cover my gaps.
Yeah.
And I think we sometimes do this without noticing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a book like Principles helped me be more mindful that I was actively choosing to do that. That's a book I'd recommend. But in terms of practices, I also recommend journaling. I'm a big proponent of journaling, writing your thoughts and feelings with a frequency that feels right to you. It doesn't have to be every single day. It can really help you zoom out and sometimes look back and see the journey that you've been on and spot themes and patterns that may be helpful for you in making decisions.
Do you use pen and paper, or do you use a digital tool for that?
I prefer a digital tool. I like to be able to jump to a specific year really quickly and jump to a specific month. And I like to be able to compare things, but that's the techie in me that doesn't want to let go of a
What
lot
do
of
you
the
use?
convenience.
What tool do you use? Do you want to give a shout?
I use just the Google Docs
Google
doc.
Docs. And do you lock them down, or do you just you lock them down?
Yeah, they are locked.
Yeah, they're locked inside your vault. Look, some people use Google Docs. I think I've used Journal before. I don't know if you've used Journal, the Mac app. It's all locked up in a vault. Just don't ever forget your password. But look, Heldiney, it's been great. Like I the moment you walked in, I was looking for you. I remember you came in through the door and I go, "How's it going?" And you're like, "Oh, I know you." And I was like, "I know you." I was like, "What time are you on?" And I want to speak. Do you want to do a podcast? And you're like, "Oh, we don't have time. I've got to go back to London." But so thank you for giving me your time and, being open and being relatively vulnerable, on this conversation. I know people will appreciate it. But if people want to follow up with you and follow your journey and maybe keep an eye on when you're speaking at other conferences, what's the best way for people to do that?
I'm currently on X, it's called now, formerly Twitter. You can follow me on LinkedIn, and my Twitter @X@ is the same as my first name, Heldiney. Same on LinkedIn. There aren't many Heldineys out there, so cool you'll be able to find me easily.
Super cool name. Well, look, Heldiney, thank you so much for your time, and I'll chat to you soon.
Speak soon. Thanks for having me, Jerry.